Hey guys, Scott once again here with you. What I'm doing right now today is just strictly a beer dissection video on Big Slide Brewing Company, Lake Placid Pub and Brewery, Maple Porter. Okay. If you're interested in, on prior videos on Porter, I think I did one on Founders, I think I did on Guinness Stout. I talk about the Porter style of beer, so if you crave a little history about Porter and things like that, definitely refer to those videos. I may do one again. Today I just want to kind of talk about these breweries as well as this beer today and kind of talk about it. Lake Placid Pub and Brewery is the main brewery in the town of Lake Placid, and they have a sister brewery called Big Slide, which I believe I sometimes lose track. I guess I had about 6 beers in crowlers delivered to me last week. I've been doing some videos on them, and so if you're interested in this brewery, which I recommend because it's kind of my home away from home, and enjoy all their beers, I ordered some beers, had them sent down to me. I've been doing some videos on them. But Lake Placid in general is phenomenal, as well as the beers that come from there. So I have like videos on Ubu Ale, the Berliner Weiss. I may have a stout coming up, and Ubu Ale, their classic Ubu Ale, English Strong Ale beer to take a look at. But the brewery, I think, has been there roughly 25 years. They've won many awards. They're ranked very high in a lot of different categories with their beers. So I put my reputation on the line because of the consistency and the quality of their beer. So what I have today, like I said, is from Big Slide Brewery, which is just down the road from Lake Placid Brewing Company, or Pub and Brewery, which many of you who are in my triathlon community are very well aware of these breweries. It's their Maple Porter. So this is at 5.4%, 22 IBUs, probably just enough to balance the sweetness. I'm presuming that there's going to be some maple syrup used in it. The dubious thing about maple syrup, and I just recommended to someone about, they were talking about I'm a home brewer, on and off for about 25 years, and they wanted to put maple syrup in their beer. And I said, save the maple syrup, put it on your pancakes and waffles. The reason why is that yeasts are going to ferment all the sugars in the maple syrup very quickly. And maple syrup is very expensive. So, even though it has a lot of great qualities to it and a lot of great flavors to maple syrup, but it's going to ferment a lot of the sugars out, and it's going to make a little bit of a drier beer, which is absolutely fine. So I told a regular home brewer, I'm like, maybe save the syrup for your pancakes and your waffles, and don't put in your beer. But if you put in your beer, put it kind of a late addition in your beer, so at least you can get that maple flavor and taste to it. I've been to Lake Placid nearly every year since the late 90s, early 2000s. I don't recall ever having the Maple Porter, but Big Slide's younger than Lake Placid Brewing Company or Pub and Brewery. So I don't know, where they add the maple syrup. They may put it at the very end. They do say they put about 2 gallons in, which is very nice. It's using crystal malt, chocolate malt. I'm presuming some two-row malt, which is usually, the specialty grains don't give you fermentable sugar, so you have to use two-row malt or Munich malt or Vienna malt or something like that. That's going to give you some fermentable sugars to actually have beer. Things like crystal malt, chocolate malt, roasted barley, yada, 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 are specialty grains that are going to give you character to the beer, but they're not going to give you fermentable sugar, so you can never brew solely with those. So again, Lake Placid Pub and Brewery, tremendous beers there. This one I'm about to open, I don't recall ever having it, which I prefer to do with these blind beer review, beer dissection videos. But those that know us very well, my family very well, Lake Placid is a Mirror Lake Inn. as well as the breweries and all the businesses there, are very, you know, something that, you know, we hold dear to our heart as far as when we travel up there. So, so let's do this beer dissection here. All right, so Big Slide Maple Porter. All right, let's crack this bad boy open. I'm going with my Tula pint glass, a little undersized. I would use, like I usually say, you know, a Nonic pint. Regular pint is fine too. I have my Leslie Brewing Company pint glasses, which I love, but usually I rip on the shaker pints, but anything you like to drink on it. But you want to get the aroma. I'm presuming with a maple porter, I'm hoping we get some aroma of maple. Again, I never had this one before. So this is, again, 5.4%, 22 IBUs. If you want to know more about the porter style, look for my Guinness and porter videos on my playlists, okay? Probably under beer dissection. So let's crack this bad boy open. And as usual, I like to spray it all over the place. And here we go. And as most times these days, I'm pouring very aggressively. Okay, get that settled in. So again, I've never had this before. Okay, some beers I've had. I did a video on Ubu Ale, which I've had for roughly since the late 90s, early 2000s, based upon a dog, I guess, of a patron of there. That's my favorite, probably, craft beer is Ubu Ale from Lake Placid Pub Brewery. Even though I don't think I've ever had a bad beer there, but so I've done a video on that. So here we go. No shock here, no breaking news, but there's a nice, again, I usually like about 1 inch to 2 inches. That looks like closer to 2 inches, maybe even over. That's my bad. I mean, I pour things a lot more aggressively these days. So you got a nice beige head. You've got a garnet kind of red to, you know, copper, medium copper color beer. Again, this is the maple porter. So let's take a whiff of this. Okay. So first thing is, this is not going to be probably a heavily hop beer. I mean, there's 22 IBUs, probably just enough to keep the beer from being very cloying and sweet, but I get some light floral, herbal hop aroma, but little toffee, little caramel. From the hops. I mean, it is a porter, so I'm expecting that it's going to be more malt focused than hop focused beer. Light nuts, you know, maybe like lightly toasted pinoli nuts. Nothing really too rich. I don't get much maple on the nose. Probably a little subdued. I mean, you know, listen, you know, if you ever take your maple syrup and smell it out of the can, like I got it in my refrigerator, the kids use some maple syrup. I believe that's more for Vermont, but you know, it's not like it's blasting you like you smell like maple, you know, syrup. So, and like I said, a lot of it's going to ferment out. I don't know, you know, if again, I'm stuttering because, you know, I haven't spoken to the brewers at Lake Placid Brewing Company. I don't know where they're adding the 2 gallons of maple syrup. Sometimes they put it in a secondary fermenter. They transfer from the primary fermenter and they add it there. The yeast are still going to act on a lot of the sugars in there, or they're adding it in the boil. So I don't know where they've added it. There's definitely some subdued maple character to it. But it's very nice smelling. I mean, it's just little chocolate, maybe light, like bittersweet chocolate. You know, when you open up the bag of chocolate and you smell it initially, you know, whether it's even like your Hershey's or whatever, you just open up the bag, you smell it. You kind of get that subdued, robust kind of chocolate, but not very sweet smelling, even though sweet is not an aroma. But I definitely get light chocolate, no roast. Maybe there's a subtle roast. Maybe from the nut, the toffee and the nut aroma that I was getting. So let's take a swig of this. Oh, all right, there it is. There's the maple. Okay, so on the palate, there's no doubt there's where you get the maple. I don't get the maple much on the aroma myself personally, especially on the aftertaste. The maple is sitting there. Medium bodied, a nice hit of carbonation on the front end. Very subdued caramel, toffee on the front end. The caramel is not as high as, say, a Wee Heavy would be. Bellhaven's Wee Heavy or a Scotch Ale would be. It's actually very, very pleasant. I mean, I'm not really surprised because Lake Placid Brewing Company is probably one of my favorite microbreweries. But as I'm consuming it, I'm getting more of the maple now. I mean, I don't get much maple on the nose. You get some of that sweetness now. So it makes me think that they're putting it a little bit more on the back end, like on the secondary fermenter, maybe even when they're packaging it. I don't know for certain, but you definitely, malt profile wise, toffee, bread crust, graham cracker, like you're pouring maple syrup over like your waffles. But you know what? It's not cloying sweet like if you were drinking maple syrup. So don't expect that you're pouring it in your mouth, which you would not want that in a beer anyway. Trust me. I think sometimes people add too many sweeteners at the tail end of the beer, and you take it. It's very cloying and sweet, and it's just not. I reviewed a beer the other day with orange, and I think they were pouring like too much sweetener and orange in there. This is still pretty balanced. It's not like you're drinking dessert. I'm not going to say it's a dry beer because there is some residual sweetness there, but it's really phenomenally balanced with the maple, the crystal, the malt profile, the crystal malt. It's slightly sweet, but not cloyingly sweet. Compared to, say, a Belgian beer that looks, very similar in color. Some of the doubles out there. Sometimes, I may have brewed with, some sweeteners and maple syrup in the past. I'm a home brewer, and I'm not nowhere near the level of these guys. And sometimes it gets too sweet. You want to do too much with the beer. This has a nice balance to it. Yeah. I don't get much roast from it, which is fine. Porters sometimes will have a gentle roast to it. You don't want to be hit like an espresso roast like some stouts will be. I have one of their stouts from Lake Placid Pub and Brewery or Big Slide. I'm expecting to get a lot more roast from it. This has kind of an like a reddish hue to it. You can actually probably see me through it. So it actually has great clarity to it. The head has died down. But it's really, again, another very pleasant beer to drink. And again, at 5.4%, 22 IBUs. I can remember the IBUs, International Bitterness Units, which I've used in the past. just to put in perspective, it's tough to say, look at a raw number and say, well, it's going to be a certain amount of bitterness, because, you know, it's more perceived bitterness and sweetness that you're concerned about, because, you know, it's at 22 IBUs. You know, a lot of, you know, premium, you know, Pilsner Urquell or a Pilsner will be roughly 30, 40 IBUs. Those are going to have more pronounced, you know, you're going to perceive the bitterness more on your tongue and your palate. This has a lot of malt up front, as well as the maple syrup. So when you have that other bitterness, the bitterness is not going to, it's still going to give you perceived sweetness and not much bitterness at all, even though it's, you know, even at 22 IBUs. So, you know, it's kind of you know, you have a pendulum swinging one way or the other with this. But this is very nice. You know, I don't know much about the brewers at Lake Placid Brewing Company, but they obviously know what they're doing with a lot of their styles. Even if this style wouldn't be your particular cup of tea, porters. But, so, you know, it's probably slightly lighter in color than typical porters. Really no roast to speak of, which even in porters, if you have roast, you only want a light amount of roast anyway. Pretty much it. Let me just get the mouthfeel. You know, light to medium bodied. I mean, a little lighter than a typical porter. Drinks a little bit more like a brown ale. You know, there's no astringency at all to it. There's no alcoholic warmth that I would usually sometimes get it, especially at 5.4%. You know, maybe a subdued chocolate is probably the darkest type of roast you're going to get. Definitely not hop forward. You know, when I first poured it, maybe I was getting a little herbal quality in the hops. But again, hops is not very important in this style of beer anyway. I wouldn't really be too concerned about that. That's it. I consider this another home run by Big Slide Brewery / Lake Placid Brewing Company. I don't know much about their brewers, but obviously, you know, they're putting out quality beers year after year. We've been going there since, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. So something to check out, guys. Until the next time, hopefully you got a little info there. And Lake Placid Pub and Brewery, Big Slide Brewery, and they have a Saranac Brewery opening up in 2023. Have a great holidays, guys. I'm recording this sometime in mid-December of 2022. And if you're interested in other beers from them, either they're posted or they'll be posted forthcoming. I have about roughly 6 beers. I may not do all videos on them all the time, but they're out there. All right. Take care, guys. Talk to you soon, or see you soon.